caste discrimination really ended in India, but incidents and data tells a different story. What makes casteism exist in our modern society and how it prevails as well as damages the social and democratic fabric of our own nation. Even after 75 years of independence, caste remains one of the most enduring fault lines in India. From villages, bureaucracies, institutional setups, it is the caste which is defining who gets dignity, opportunity and justice. So caste might have changed its form, but the function, it still remains the same. Hello everyone, welcome to Vajram and Ravi's Flash News. My name is Shubhangi Singh and today we are going to understand casteism and how it exists in our modern society. Now when we are talking about casteism, caste discrimination, there is a probability you might think that it doesn't exist in India anymore, but that might be coming from the fact that you are not the one who is discriminated against and also that you are not aware about the ground realities that we see. Now I am going to highlight 2 to 3 incidents that we have recently seen. One, a suicide by a civil servant where in his final notes he has pointed towards not just corruption but caste discrimination as well. Then yet again a death in UP which was caused by lynching. That means equivalent to murder has happened because of caste. Another incident that I would like to highlight to you here is the shoe throwing incident at our Chief Justice of India. What all these incidents have common is the fact that caste discrimination still exists in our country starkly, and these are the people who are at the receiving end of it. Now let us try to understand why does casteism exist in the so-called modern world of ours and especially why in our country. So the first reason that you can understand is because of the socialization itself. Because caste is something that is embedded so deeply, it has been conditioned so deeply that it has not been able to be removed from the daily usage, the daily behavior as well as the language that we get to see. The casteism also reflects in the language or the lingo that you are using day-to-day basis. Another thing that we are seeing is the economic and social capital. Caste still remains one of those factors which controls access to jobs, credits as well as social networks in our country. You might want to point out here that there is a reservation, but reservation might get you a seat, but it will not get you the dignity, it will not get you the respect, because that comes through human changes, behavioral changes and cultural changes. That brings me to the third point is the cultural hegemony. We find that still the dominant castes are the ones who define what is the respectable norms of behavior as well as occupation in itself. This is not it. There are other factors as well. People in the cities might feel that cities are casteless, but that is a sheer myth because these biases which exist widely open in the rural areas, in urban areas, they exist very subtly. They are seen through the housing, they are seen in marriage qualifications where it is decided based on the caste and also multiple times in terms of professional exclusions. So when we are talking about the symbolic assertion that comes from the backward classes, it usually leads to a huge backlash and we have seen violence as well associated with it. And we have examples, be it Hariom Valmiki's lynching in Raebareli this year, or if we talk about the suicide of IPS officer in Haryana itself. If these incidents are not enough, let us also look at the data in front of us. Over more than 57,000 caste-based atrocity cases have been registered alone under SC/ST Act, that is showing a 6% increase over 2023. If we talk about the conviction rate of the number, it is less than 30%, and if we talk about the pendencies of cases, then if there are 100 cases, 90 cases are still pending till date. If you look at the states which have reported highest number of cases, they are UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. This clearly proves my point that casteism caste discrimination exists in modern India as well. Now the next question that might pop in your head, that when we are talking about existence of casteism in modern India, probably it does not exist in institutional frameworks or neutral setups. The problem with such issues is the fact that they creep into state framework, institutional frameworks as well, and that we have seen again in India. Now let us try to break this down. The first thing, if we talk about representation we have seen in form of reservation. We have enabled representation to the classes which required them, but this is equality that has been created. But when we talk about the real level, ground level, at the informal level, they are excluded, and that has been seen. Why Puran Kumar, whose suicide has sparked so many allegations, is a classic example of this, where he might have been able to secure a seat with his merit and reservation, but he didn't get to be the part of the network. The cultural bias is present in these state and bureaucratic institutions as well. Usually merit is seen as an upper caste thing, and usually Dalit officers, they feel subtle humiliations, the language that is used, the behavior towards them, and mostly isolation as well. Furthermore, there is a direct institutional resistance as well. If there are complaints of discrimination, it is not taken seriously. People usually nudge it off, ye to hota hi rehta hai, this is usually seen, and there is no proper mechanism which can address this concern or eliminate. And this leads to a psychological toll. That means mental health impact that deteriorates the productivity of these officers and what they are placed for. They are not able to deliver on that. So here we have Y. Puran Kumar, who becomes a symbol of alienation. We get to see civil services, which should have been the vehicle of equality. It is rather mirroring the societal bias, and the representation that we are talking about is merely on papers, and what we are getting to see that institutional culture remains deeply caste rooted. I have already given you these examples. This clearly shows that how society is discomfort when we see officers at elite position coming from the Dalit background, when we are seeing officers becoming the victim of isolation and caste-based discrimination. And many of you who might be thinking that it doesn't exist in urban areas, let me bring you to the fact that it does exist. It is different in urban and different in rural. The forms have changed, the functions have not. If we are talking about rural areas, you will find the discrimination is direct, it is physical, it is out there. In urban areas, it is covert and subtle. There will be hiring bias, there will be social isolation, there will be housing segregation which will be present. Visibility will be lower because it is coverted, but that doesn't mean it does not exist. It is present in urban India as much as it is present in rural India itself. And when we talk about the numbers, we get to see that 80% cases of caste atrocities are happening in rural areas, but don't be fooled by the numbers, because urban areas do not see such cases, or the number is not as high because of the under-reporting that is existing. So what does this mean? Does this mean that casteism will never go away? Are there no safeguards available to it, be it legal or constitutional? No, we do have legal and constitutional safeguards. But the question arises is why they are not working and why they are not helping the situation. Let us understand what are the constitutional and legal safeguards available to address the situation of caste discrimination. What are the legal and constitutional safeguards available to address or to tackle this enduring fault that exists in our societal as well as democratic fabric as casteism? So when we are talking about constitutional provisions, we have constitutional provision in fundamental rights as well. If we are talking about Article 15, it directly prohibits discrimination based on the grounds of caste. If we talk about Article 17, it abolishes untouchability. Then we have Article 46, which also has directive to promote scheduled caste and scheduled tribe welfare. and we also have Article 338, which establishes the National Commission of Scheduled Castes. Can you tell me in the comment section, when we are talking about Article 338, it is which section, A, B, which one which addresses scheduled caste, and what are the other provisions for? Now, when we are talking about these constitutional provisions, we have more when we are talking about statutory or legal provisions as well, which are made by the law. That means we have SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989. That means that there is proper criminalization if there is any humiliation, violence or discrimination that occurs. There is Protection of Civil Rights Act of 1955, which prohibits untouchability and any sort of such practices. The problem is not the fact that constitutional or legal rights do not exist. The problem is that they are not being implemented. There are implementation loopholes which need to address. Otherwise, no matter what the law says, no matter what the constitution says, this is the reality of Indian society. At present, when we are talking about implementation gaps, we get to see severe underreporting that usually happens because of the fear of retaliation or weak investigation, and that fear is true because the conviction rate that we have already seen is merely 28%. There is a probability that you might not get justice in next 10 years because 90% of the cases are pending in special courts. Can you look at this figure? When we have special court, that's when this is the pendency, let alone if it had to follow the normal court procedure. And another huge implementation gap is the institutional apathy. Poor sensitivity training is there and accountability mechanism does not exist. And this is something you can use as a case study for understanding that why empathy is so important in such scenarios to actually eradicate casteism from India. That will facilitate the real growth in terms of our society, in terms of our polity as well as morality. Now, moving ahead, let us understand, when we are looking at constitutional provisions, legal provisions, we have understood what is the status of caste discrimination in India, and it is disheartening to say that this was one of the primary concerns when we were getting independence, and it is still prevalent. So now let us look into understanding that can India ever move from here on, that the problem that we are in, that we are not considering a person to be person, we are labeling them based on caste, can this ever be eradicated? Hopefully yes, but the question is how? We need to move from representation to transformation. How transformation? This is about telling people, making them aware and bringing in a cultural reform where people are able to understand that what is required. This is a cultural change where there is empathy, there is morality, and you are considering a person as a person, not based on his color, not based on gender, not based on caste. And that cultural reform will not happen through reservation. This will happen through sensitivity training. This will happen through awareness. Furthermore, institutional sensitization is very important. Mandatory caste sensitivity training, especially in bureaucracy and judiciary. But the problem is, it shouldn't be just on papers. It needs to be implemented real time, auditing, surprise checks, everything is required. And the basic change will come from the ground itself. That means we need to bring reform in education. That means caste awareness and Ambedkar's thought should be introduced in the curriculum itself, so that the sensitization starts at the very fundamental level. This also brings in the role of the fourth pillar of our democracy, that is media. Media which talks about everything, it is important that they ensure caste is reported in a structural way, not as a personal thing. And when we are talking about social recognition, it usually is tied with economic independence as well. So we need to economically empower as well. That lies on the part of government, which can be done. So even when India has one of the most comprehensive, extensive frameworks legal frameworks for addressing the caste discrimination, it is not working. So that means there is a need for a overhaul, a reform, because as B.R. Ambedkar has rightly said that political democracy cannot last unless there lies the base of social democracy. So when we are trying to talk about social democracy, caste would be a hindering factor, and it is high time that we eradicate it from our Indian society. On this note, I would like to end this discussion and also highlight the fact that the caste discrimination or casteism in India is not because lack of laws, it is happening because of lack of empathy and also sensitivity. So let us think about that, bring awareness, change our surroundings so that we look towards a better and brighter future in our own country. That was all from my side. Thank you so much.